Hey guys, it's me, Sam Stein, managing editor at the Bulwark. I am joined by Ben Smith and Max Tani, both of Semafor, and we are here to talk about group chats and how they've become the epicenters of power. Before we do that, subscribe to the feed. We appreciate the subscriptions; it's helpful. Watch the video too; could be informative. Ben, Max, thanks so much. We're talking about this piece that Ben has up. The group chats that changed America. Before we get into it, it's great writing, but really, it's great editing. Who was the editor?
We're as you may have been in this kind of situation where you're like a scrappy startup and it's kind of like you just try to wrangle somebody, and so I just dropped the Google Doc into a chat, and Max did a little bit of editing.
Oh my
But
God, it
but
was
but
Max.
Liz
I could
Hoffman
tell.
Liz Hoffman did most of the editing. Great,
Liz
the
had-
joke was
journalist.
gonna be that Max was the editor. Max, I want you to be clear. Max told me privately that he edited it.
I added some
Now
stuff.
he's
I
getting
did add a
exposed.
few
You did.
little.
Okay.
I added a few little tweaks. I have really high level conceptual stuff.
Yeah,
I'm not in the
top
weeds.
editing. Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
weeds there.
He was at the
with,
30,000 foot level.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's the thrust of this, and Ben, I want you to just kind of lay out both your reporting process and also what you think the central takeaway here is. But for me, it was that everyone is just shooting the shit on Signal, including like the masters of the universe, and they have these crazy conversations. But in this case, they're happening among people who have like direct lines to Trump and his minions, and they're actually, as you say, navigating or orchestrating or whatever the verb is, the policies of this country.
Yeah, I mean, I think, basically what happened was that in 2020, when social media was sort of very progressive, very heated, um, a lot of these folks who were kind of, I would say, ranging from really quite pro-Trump and on the right, but mostly kind of center-right tech entrepreneurs who typically supported Democrats, supported Republicans, kind of retreated from social media into these group chats. Mark Andreessen, the creator of the Netscape browser and kind of iconic VC, venture capitalist, orchestrated a lot of these. Like, he arranged them first for his tech industry peers who spent a lot of time talking about how woke and annoying their own employees were. Like, this was a main feature of the chats, was like,
Just
my
to be clear,
employees
every
want me
boss
to
does this. Yes,
Yes,
of course.
but like my employees, but a lot of it was like, my employees want me to put a Black Lives Matter logo up. I don't want to. I'm afraid that like that was that's sort of where they started. And then
It's probably like, do we need to do pronouns in the email signatures?
no,
This is so
literally, that's what
annoying.
this was about.
Yeah.
And then they moved to Signal, where they were talking about more explicitly political stuff. And at first they had a bunch of the authors of the Harper's letter in one of the signals with Andreessen, who were sort of free speech liberals.
Yeah,
And at some point, Andreessen and Christopher Rufo, a conservative activist who was in those, like, just got sick of them and were like, we're tired of talking about free speech. We want we want to crush our enemies.
Right.
And we don't care if that crushes their speech. And so, which is what you're seeing now. And so Mark just kind of blew up that group chat. And then they went over to this guy named Richard Hanania and found like a more conservative group. But then Mark basically got too far right for Hanania, and he left that group chat.
It sounds like Mark's just searching for soulmates and going from Signal chat to Signal
he's
chat.
a really interesting, consequential figure, and he's a little bit. It feels like he's quiet, but actually he's spending 10 plus hours a day influencing very
well. So he
powerful
does
people
occasionally he picks his head up and he does a podcast or something like that. And I feel like of all the Silicon Valley titans, his power and influence is sort of the least appreciated. It's and you're. I was going to ask you to be this later, but it does seem like this is sort of the undertone of this piece, which is, there's epicenters of power. Obviously, Elon's one, and Trump is one, of course, and Steve Bannon's one, and so on and so forth. And the all-in guys have their own little thing, and Tucker's one. But like Mark seems to be a real mover and shaker.
Yeah, I think to some degree he's patient zero for the sort of Silicon Valley moved alliance with Trump. And really? Elon comes later, and Zuckerberg comes like hopping along a little too late. But
why did he get there first?
Well, he's always been a Republican. Like he's of the right in some general way. But also he wrote an essay called "It's Time to Build" which was the root of the first group chat was called Build, and about this idea that I think they talked themselves into, that this is who Donald Trump would be. About a kind of like, we've spent the last 10 years building ad tech, and we need to build like patriotic industry, space and manufacturing. And actually it wasn't, AI hadn't blown up yet, but maybe AI kind of fits that. Although their idea was we need to build like physical stuff, nuclear reactors.
Right,
And
right.
and there's a sense in which if you don't listen too closely to what Trump is saying, that he's talking about reinventing a high-tech global economy where everything is computer.
Sure.
But then when you listen more closely, he's like, everything is computer. We got to like bring like literal computer manufacturing back to the US. And that's
Right.
not what these guys want at all. And so, yeah, it's gotten a little messy. And in fact, I think they produced in these groups a kind of a groupthink and actually an idea of what the Trump administration would be like.
Well, I was going to ask, do they come up with actual, and we'll get Max in here eventually. Although, why are you even on here, Max?
You invited me.
I thought we were going to do his performance review. So.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, you guys can compare notes. You guys have each done
we
them.
both
so for
edited
me,
Max.
Fair enough. Before I get to the media component of this, I am one thing that kind of I was left wondering is it's obvious that they have an influence on Trump. Or at least paved the way for a reemergence of Trumpism in the Silicon Valley marriage of Trump. But do we know how directly they are involved currently with White House administrative operations? Obviously, David Sachs, for instance, is a member of the Crypto Council, whatever you want to call it, but he apparently left the chat in a huff. But are they making policy? Are they talking to administration officials? Are they staffing the administration?
All of those things. So David Sachs, who's the AI czar and the crypto czar, is in the chats and although he stormed out of one of the big ones recently because people were criticizing the tariffs, and he demanded that the guy, one of the chat administrators, set up a new one only for smart people to get all the dumb people out who don't like Trump.
This keeps to be a theme where they just purge themselves of people who disagree. But go ahead.
Yes, but then also Sriram Krishnan, who was actually the sort of organizer of the chats originally, is now the White House AI advisor. And then what a couple of people have told me is that like a way to get a job in the administration is that if you like own Mark Cuban in the Chatham House chat, which has Mark Cuban in it, and like David Sachs notices how awesome you are,
if
you can get a job that way. So there's a bunch of like lawyers and stuff going into the administration who basically were discovered in the chats.
Okay, let's talk about the sort of media elements of this, because there are some. I thought Twitter was supposed to be the public forum where all this stuff happened, right? Like, wasn't that the idea, Max, where you just debate out in the open? This seems like they just don't want to do that. They much rather have like-minded people and maybe get into a few arguments here or there. But as Ben notes, once they get tired of the arguments, they kind of throw them out of the chat.
Well, the interesting thing for me, and the one question that I had about the piece, and I think that we should actually continue to follow this as a reporting target, Ben, is where Elon kind of fits into
editor for a hot minute, and suddenly he's making assignments.
No, that's a great point.
But it is true that all of these people are part of the Elon universe, right. And Elon certainly is involved in some of these group chats, some other group chats, secret, more high level, more smart people kind of group chats, but is not specifically in some of these ones. But it seems very clearly to me that a lot of the people who were in these group chats were also the people who used to be extremely online on Twitter. Mark Andreessen was PMarca and was just a prolific tweeter follower. He followed me at Business Insider when I had like 500 followers. This guy is tapped into all streams of possible information. And as Ben writes, as these guys became increasingly alienated by kind of the woke left on Twitter, they moved into these spaces. And I think that Elon's buying of Twitter was an attempt, in some ways, it seems, to kind of retake control of that conversation and to kind of drive it to be closer to what he saw in these group chats.
It's funny. I forget who it was there's a video of a former Elon friend turned foe, but fuck, I wish I remembered who it was. But basically they're like, Elon had a private disagreement with me. It got really heated back and forth. And I think Elon's response was like, fucking come at me on Twitter, not directly. Like Elon wanted the public engagement on his own platform, obviously, but he wanted them to do it out in the open, and that's not what's happening here.
Well, to a certain degree, it also seems like there is this. There are two kind of competing impulses and feelings that some of these folks have, which is the actual desire, as Ben writes, which is the actual desire for real high-level conversation among the smartest people in the world, and also people who will confirm their views about various different policies and how woke has gone too far.
But doesn't this just breed groupthink? I mean, that was what I was. I mean, Chris Lehman in The Nation wrote about it, but he was like, "This is just high-level groupthink with a number of people who have immense self-regard."
It does feel a little bit like blue sky for the richest people in the entire world. Ben, what do you think?
I mean, it seems like, it's not, everything breeds groupthink. I mean, just think about, because it is true that, I mean, a lot of the people on there like love and really like, or at least loved these spaces and did find them incredibly valuable, particularly like the tech focused one. If you're like an AI CEO and you're in some chat with Sam Altman and others, like it's pretty cool and interesting. But and it is also true that like the notion that there was this period of time when the way you had public conversation was you walked into an open air insane asylum and just screamed at the top of your lungs is like pretty weird. I mean, Twitter was pretty weird.
It's still weird. It's gotten weirder, yeah.
And actually, like Elon taking Twitter over means that a lot of them have gone back to Twitter and Substack and podcasts, and this chat ecosystem is sort of dying, I think. And actually, what one of them told me was that whereas it used to be that you went into Signal because you were afraid of saying something that the left would go after you for, you now, the thing you say in Signal but not on Twitter is criticism of Donald Trump, because that's what his career consequences.
Right. And I just want to be clear, like there's always been a variation of these types of chats, right? Like I think you were on it, but I certainly was journalist.
Hell yeah.
Journalist, yes.
Journalist. Ezra Klein started it.
Yeah. Let's
our mixed
the viewers,
Signal former guest, Ezra Klein.
For the uninformed, well, God, that's so long ago now, but it was an email list of like academics and think tankers and journalists. And it was the most benign, often boring stuff, but it got blown up into a legitimate scandal because people thought that the journalists on there were taking instructions on how to cover Barack Obama or something like that.
Yeah, or the soft version of it, voiced by our friend Mickey Kaus, is like that it was like kind of a machine for groupthink, and people were like workshopping their ideas and then all coming out together as sort of a mob, and like all the real disagreement is in private, and then in public you just sort of brigade your enemies. And I think that was
is that not this?
That is this, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of a legitimate criticism of both of these things.
Well, and the thing and this is something that people guard against to a degree, which is audience capture, right? Like you don't want to, you are reluctant to agree, and maybe it's subconscious or not, to offend your key and core audience. You don't like going on Twitter and then getting harangued, right? Like you don't want to. Sometimes you don't want to report things because you're fearful of the reaction it might induce. You still should report it, and you often and the good ones do.
Yeah,
but that is a
real
that
reaction. But
it's see that's the thing.
Weird.
I like pissing people off on Twitter. I like people find that weird, but I enjoy stirring the pot.
This is why people hate people. This is why people hate the media. Is that the people who are best at it just love pissing off large groups of people, which is not a normal human impulse.
No, it is true that
it's true.
I said this at a wedding toast once that for most of us, that like the reason that we're good at journalism is the same reason that we're bad people. Like there's like a lot of overlap.
Yeah, but I guess go ahead.
But I mean, I think that this is something clearly that the folks in the group chat are kind of wrestling with, is that they really these folks are not people who get delight out of swerving in a different direction, or finding things out that disagree with their preconceived notions, and that's why they keep kind of fleeing these spaces into smaller and smaller groups, and that's the reason why so many of them dislike people in the media and spend their time obsessing over how the mainstream media has done them wrong. I think that it's I think that that's a factor at play.
That's my theory of the case, is that these people are fine. These people are fine taking critiques if they come from people who they think are their peers, but they're not fine taking criticism from the proletariat.
Yeah, I think that there's something to that. I do think there's something about these private spaces in general where you have a sense of like, well, like we can have an open conversation and disagree among ourselves. And actually, it was funny because I sent just the world's most benign and innocuous email.
I loved it.
To Balaji Srinivasan and Joe Lonsdale, because I was going to quote them. There's sort of an illustrative anecdote that I used as the lead about guys having a kind of spirited argument. That was really it. And said in the email that I don't think there's really anything that interesting here, but just wanted to give you a heads up and would love to talk to you further. And they then both went on Twitter, went nuts, and the journalists are out to get us. But the thing that they most wanted to say was that like the fact that we disagreed in private does not mean that we aren't friends and aren't fundamentally on the same team against the communists and the journalists. And which is to say, like, well, everything you say in public is basically fake and propaganda, right, and only in private can you say real things, which is sort of depressing.
It is depressing, but also Max and I were talking about how congratulations. There's nothing better than some source trying to preempt your story and just
That's great.
driving
Yeah, it's like
more
a little
attention
drum roll.
to it. Yeah, please don't read this story. It's so
And
bad.
I do think that style, which maybe there was a period. I mean, I agree with some of their criticism of tech journalism that I think kind of misunderstood those guys and their motives, because they're basically business people, not political actors, and they did feel very besieged. Probably more than, I don't know. They could have thicker skins, but also I don't think their grievances are fake. But whatever it is, like, it just that has run its course. That I thought it was hilarious when they were doing that on Twitter, and as far as I can tell, even their own followers were just like, "What are you doing?" That's a very polite email.
Yeah, it wasn't. And the anecdote, it was fine, but it wasn't going to change their lives. It wasn't like, a Me Too allegation or something. It was like,
I actually have a question for both of you guys and for Ben. Do you think that what they're saying, because you pointed out they both rushed to Twitter to say that, to say this, and like, especially, both of those people who you mentioned are people who spend a lot of time on Twitter and tweeting about various things, and in fact are prolific tweeters themselves. How much of what they're saying in these group chats is just exactly the same stuff that they're saying on Twitter? Because it sounds quite similar to me. It's a lot of overlap.
For a while, I think they were saying like, the woke mob is here to get us. How do we save ourselves? They were not saying that on Twitter. Now like most of these chats, like probably most of your group chats are, oh my God, did you see that tweet? And you should tweet that.
Yeah. But also a large amount of like disgust with Taylor Lorenz. I feel like that, like,
but that's a classic example. If you ever got a sense of like, why are all you can like Taylor Lorenz's journalism, you can not like it, but if you ever got a sense of like those tech guys were like really, like, you did feel like, wow, they must all be talking about her and obsessing about her in some secret place, given how developed their theories and hatred is. That was the secret place.
But to your point, Max, there's been multiple, it's fairly regularly where I see like a bunch of stuff on Twitter that seems almost coordinated because they're all harping on the same story or the same tweet or the same viral moment. Now, it's not necessarily from that high level, so maybe it's not from the chats, but there does seem to be a fair bit of sort of like, look at this, and then everyone disperses to their public.
It's just the same way in which you sometimes workshop a tweet with your friends, in the chat. Some of my best posts comes from dropping something that's good into a chat. And I'm like, good. I
always run it on Slack.
Exactly. I feel like I've stopped a few. I feel like I've stopped a few good Sam Stein.
Oh my God, you have saved me on occasion. Maybe they would have done better. I don't know.
I don't do that. I think I'm a crazy. I just never think. I just post first.
Just go straight for it. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I will just say, if you're watching this and if you're in one of these chats, pull a Jeffrey Goldberg, add me in. Happy to just lurk, offer some opinions on New Haven pizza every now and then. Maybe talk NBA playoffs, but that's it. Max, Tani, Ben Smith, both the Semafor. Read the piece. It is the group chats that changed America.
And listen to our podcast. I got to plug that.
Mixed Signals Podcast, hosted by Ben Smith and me.
Mixed Signals Podcast. I expect an invite on, okay? This is reciprocal. All right, take care, guys. Appreciate it.
Hey, YouTube fam. If you want to support the Bulwark, the best way to do it is by becoming a YouTube Bulwark Plus member. The Bulwark is truly independent. We have no corporate overlords. We're not settling any dumb lawsuits with Trump. By joining, you help support our work, and you can get a bunch of perks right here on this platform. Ad-free content, bonus videos, live streams, and some emojis of me, which I guess some people want. So come join, come hang out, become a Bulwark YouTube Plus member, and I'll be seeing you in the comments. So behave.